Welcome into Matt Bernier Show, DRF TV, live.drf.com, livestream.com, the Daily Racing Forum's Twitter handle at DRF Inside Post, as well as the Daily Racing Forum's Facebook page. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. This is the recap edition of the Matt Bernier Show, taking a look back at racing from this past weekend. That would be the weekend of July the 7th. Much to do at Belmont Park. A couple other races we'll go over as well, including the Delaware Oaks and things of that nature, as well as the Victory Ride from this past Sunday. If you listen in podcast form, like most of you do, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com, as well as Spotify. If you listen on YouTube, click that subscribe button. You'll get all the latest offerings from DRF TV. You'll listen on iTunes, write us a little review, give us a positive rating. It would be greatly, greatly appreciated. As I made mention, a lot to do at Belmont Park. We'll also give you the weekend's best buyer speed figure performances, regardless of surface and all those sorts of things, and give you a little bit of a stakes montage for the races that we couldn't touch on. Plus, as we always do, the DRF TV schedule of events for this upcoming week. Without further ado, let's dive right into it. Let's start off with the Grade 1 races out at Belmont. We'll begin with the boys, 3-year-olds going 1.25 miles on the inner turf course. This was the field for this year's Belmont Derby Invitational. Really an interesting race. You had 9 horses in here, but you could have made a case for, I would say, 5 or 6 of them when it was all said and done. Your post-time favorite ended up being Analyze It. Analyze It was an odd second to Catholic Boy in their most recent start at the Pennine Ridge, the local prep for this race, because Analyze It looked like he was going to just run right on by Catholic Boy, and he actually did. Unfortunately, if you were a fan of Analyze It, he ended up just throwing it into neutral, and Catholic Boy came back and actually won that race. 1.25 miles I was a little bit concerned about, but I figured, you know what, if he's going to be able to get the distance, perhaps it's going to be a situation where now the better horse, maybe he puts it all together, and Catholic Boy, maybe he's a notch below, or maybe Catholic Boy is just tough as nails and wants to go out and beat you. Then you had other interesting runners like Hunting Horn in here. You had My Boy Jack, you had Hawkish, Maraud, you name it. You had a couple of different interesting ways to go. Ended up being another absolute barn burner down the stretch, and basically a replay of what we saw on the Pennine Ridge. Here's the stretch run from Larry Colmus.
Comes Hawkish as the field makes their way to the top of the stretch. Analyze It runs alongside of Catholic Boy. And these two come to the final furlong together. Analyze It on the outside in front. Catholic Boy is second. Hunting Horn trying to come and get them. Analyze It. Catholic Boy battling him again today. Analyze It. Catholic Boy. And then Hunting Horn on the outside. Who's it going to be? It's a photo that's going to be a head bobber. Maybe Catholic Boy. He could have come back.
Catholic Boy emerges victorious. He is a Grade 1 winner now. He gets the job done at odds of 5-1 in this year's Belmont Derby over Analyze It. We had the exact same exacta coming from the Pennine Ridge. That's what we had replicated in this year's Belmont Derby. Third was the import for Aidan O'Brien. Hunting Horn, if you played the exacta for $1, came back $17.70, and the trifecta for 50 cents came back $26.87. Let's talk about Catholic Boy a little bit. He's 5 of 8 lifetime, 6 times in the exacta, over $1.1 million in career earnings. Owned by Robert V. LaPenta, Madicat Stables LLC, Sienna Farm LLC, and Twin Creeks Racing. Trained by Jonathan Thomas, bred by Fred W. Hertrick III and John D. Fielding in Kentucky. Ridden to victory by Javier Castellano, and you see the pedigree at the bottom of the horse card. He is by More Than Ready out of a Bernardini mare named Song of Bernadette. From a speed figure standpoint, let's dive into the nuts and bolts there. Both Catholic Boy and Analyze It both earn 99 buyer speed figures and 119 Timeform US ratings. Hunting Horn, a 95 buyer and a 117 Timeform US rating. For what it's worth, Timeform US had the miles split in this race, color-coded blue, meaning it was probably a little bit advantageous for the horses that are forwardly placed and potentially compromising the horses coming from off of it. I can say that about all the fractions in this race because 24-2, 49-1, 13-1 for 3/4, those are pedestrian fractions at best, particularly over that Belmont turf course, which has just been absolutely rock solid. And really, when you look at the flow of this race based on the chart, it's kind of how this race went. The 1-2-3 finishers were 1-2-3 basically every single call throughout this run, and the only horse to make up any sort of significant ground was Channel Cat, and he was still 4 lengths behind the top 3. As far as the race itself is concerned, I'm still fascinated when you have horses that have shown a little bit of early tactical speed and they don't show it and they don't use it, and it allows a horse like Catholic Boy to just go out there, and Javier said as much. He goes, nobody else wanted to lead, so we went on with it, and they weren't going that fast. And I think if you were a fan of Analyze It, perhaps you would have wanted to see him press the pace a little bit more, but you were probably afraid, and I'm sure the connections involved were a little bit concerned as well. Do you get a replica of what you had in a race like the Pennine Ridge, where they threw it down for that final half mile, and then maybe a horse like Hunting Horn who sits just off of it, he takes advantage and gets the job done. They kept it a really, really tepid, moderate pace, And then these two sprinted home. But again, we had almost a carbon copy of the Pennine Ridge where Analyze It looks like he's just going to go blowing by. And for the final 16th of a mile, he pops to his left lead, and Catholic Boy comes back on the inside and gets the job done by a head. It's one of those instances. Chad has said it. He goes, you know, I'm just going to kind of go back to the drawing board. Maybe we need to do something from an equipment standpoint with Analyze It because the talent is still there, and he proved that he can get a mile and a quarter. This is just something that he's developed a bad habit of, going out there and hanging his chances. It's a little bit reminiscent of what we've seen from Wonder Godot prior to them adding the blinkers, and then she goes on to a smashing score in the Queen's Plate last weekend. Maybe it's just a matter of Analyze It needing a little bit of an equipment change. Chad has made mention of that. Plan is the Secretariat at Arlington Park on August the 11th that may add the blinkers. And who knows, maybe that'll make all the difference. The one thing that we know for certain is he will not be facing Catholic Boy because Catholic Boy, it sounds like, is going to get a little bit of a vacation here. They'll be targeting a race, Jonathan Thomas said, up at Saratoga, either the Travers on dirt at a mile and a quarter or the Saranac the following weekend on Woodward weekend. I will be absolutely floored if it's not the Travers for his next start. Because you're looking at a horse now, and there's a few different things that go into it. We know this horse is actually pretty good on dirt, and I don't want to hold his Florida Derby against him because he bled as badly as he did. And he ran okay in that race down at Tampa Bay Downs. It wasn't great, but he ran fair enough, especially when you consider that was his first start as a 3-year-old. But more importantly, if you're in this from a breeding standpoint, this horse is a Grade 1 winner on turf. He is a Grade 2 winner on dirt, but if you can get a Grade 1 at a distance that he's going to excel at, 10 furlongs, all of a sudden his value goes through the roof. I will be floored if he is not running on dirt up at Saratoga in the Travers as opposed to the Saranac. I think Catholic Boy is a nice horse. For what it's worth, each one of those horses, the top two, Catholic Boy came home in 22:53, Analyze It 22:46, and Hunting Horn 22:42. The connections with Hunting Horn, they made mention they thought that the pace, the lack thereof, probably compromised his chances a little bit, but he ran just fine. And I think this is probably pretty darn close to a replica of what he ran at Royal Ascot a few weeks back. So I don't think they can really complain too much. Maybe, again, with the exception of the pace not really being there. But I think he basically ran the same race he ran over at Royal Ascot because he was 4 lengths clear of the rest of the field. I just think those top 3, they ran very well, but they had a lot of things go their way. Part of that, though, is talent. They're just probably better than everyone else. You had a couple of really disappointing efforts in here. My boy Jack, he just never showed any interest whatsoever. He never picked his feet up. This was a terrible effort, and I really thought getting back to turf would be beneficial for him, that this is what he wanted all along. Hard for me to sit there and say there was any excuse there. He was just god-awful. You look at a horse like Channel Cat, he got in a little bit tight early on, but he came with a little bit of a run at the end. Goofy with his lead changes still. I would like eventually for something to happen with this horse where he finally puts it together. I think distance is his friend, but he's clearly not in the same level as those top 3 horses. I suppose the one that you want to really give the benefit of the doubt to is Hawkish, because Hawkish, this was his first time going up against quality company at a longer distance. He had already proven that he could handle those middle distances. Getting out to 10 furlongs, that was going to be a test in and of itself. But then it doesn't help when you're 4-5 path basically from jump. He was wider than wide throughout, and he flattened out down the lane. I kind of want to give him the benefit of the doubt and say, you know what, give him a little bit of time, get him back to probably a shorter distance, and see what you can do. Although having said that, I wouldn't be opposed to the connections deciding to send him out to Arlington to run in a race like the Secretariat, because if you give him a little bit of a more favorable trip and perhaps a little bit of a more favorable pace setup, I don't know. The jury's still out. It's too early to tell how good this horse is, or is he quite, is he of the caliber of an Analyze It or a Catholic Boy, or is he just a slight notch below? I still think you have to be optimistic for the possibility of what Hawkish can turn into down the road. But as far as this race is concerned, the big two, they kind of did what many people thought they would do. I was a little bit dubious of the form of that race. I thought maybe the distance was going to be better for Catholic Boy than Analyze It, and he would have been the one of the two had I needed to make a choice. My choice, my boy Jack, was terrible. There's really no excuse, but that summed up my Saturday afternoon as far as picks are concerned. But I do think Catholic Boy, I will be very, very surprised if you don't see him in the Travers. I know they've made mention about the Saranac. Travers, to me, Grade 1 on dirt. If they could get that, his value through the roof. I would imagine that's where you see him next in his next start, and we've already made mention. Analyze It. He looks like he's going to be headed to the Secretariat at Arlington, and Chad may add the blinkers, hopefully to get him to sort of sharpen up a little bit. But also, one last thing. From a wagering standpoint, I've brought this up in the past. If you like two horses that are separated by a head or a neck in the race prior, and then they show up again in the next race together, how can you let one go off at twice the price of the other one? And I'm not saying, even money as opposed to 2-1. I'm saying 2-1 as opposed to 5-1. We've just got like a giant chasm there. I'll never understand that. If you liked one of those horses, you had to like the other one, especially if you thought it was a situation where, okay, well, I figured if anything, it would have been the other way around. The Catholic Boy would have been the shorter one because people thought he had a better chance at the distance as opposed to Analyze It. I'm just always surprised by seeing those dynamics. And I can't sit here and throw shade at anyone specifically because, I was just up what's creek as far as picks were concerned. But I'm just always surprised. You had two horses separated by a neck. How do you let one go off at twice the price of the other one? It is what it is. Catholic Boy adds to his resume. He's a very talented horse. No one's ever doubted that. He just needed to do it on the biggest stage. He did that on Saturday afternoon. He wins the Grade 1 Belmont Derby with a 99 buyer and a 119 time form U.S. rating. The runner-up, Analyze It, 99 buyer, 119 time form U.S. rating. Filly version of the Belmont Derby is the Belmont Oaks, a field of 10 3-year-old girls signed on 1.25 miles on the inner turf at Belmont on Saturday. You had a few horses in here that were exiting the local prep. That would be the Wonder again. You had some horses coming in from California. You had horses from Kentucky. And you had a few horses coming over from Europe that were a little bit intriguing if you were so inclined. And, you always have to respect Aidan O'Brien when he runs in any of these sort of races, particularly on the turf. And I understand a lot of people have really bashed his recent North American record outside of the Breeders' Cup. But you've got to keep in mind that most of the time, the horses that he brings over that are not running in the Breeders' Cup are a notch or two below, or even 3 notches below, his 8-string over in Europe. Well, I felt like Athena was sort of case in point, and still case in point. They're second or third string is still better than our A string. Here is the stretch run from Larry Colmus, this year's Belmont Oaks.
Off the turn in front, Toinette confronts her. Significant form, right in behind the leaders and squeezing through an opening on the inside is The Way I Am, who's putting in a bid. Significant form's going to split horses, and here's Athena. And here's Athena and Ryan Moore on the far outside, and suddenly they've gone by them all. Athena to the front, and she's pulling away late. And Athena will win the Belmont Oaks by 3 lengths on the wire.
Athena blows the doors off this field. She gets the job done at odds of 10-1, winning the Belmont Oaks over The Way I Am, who, The Way I Am is about as consistent a 3-year-old you're going to find, male or female. She just shows up and runs a race. Unfortunately, it seems like she's plateaued a little bit, which again leads me to sort of indict the rest of this field. The Way I Am runs second in odds of 11-1. She's very admirable, though. If you could give me a horse that would just show up and run like that each and every time, I'd sign up for it right now. Chipolata runs third in here, first time out for Christophe Clement at odds of 36-1. She rounds out a trifecta that if you played it for 50 cents came back over $1,200. Let's talk a little bit about the winner, shall we? Athena. She is 2 of 10 lifetime now, over $600,000 in career earnings, owned by Michael B. Tabor, Mrs. John Magner, and Derek Smith, trained by Aidan O'Brien, bred by Roncon and Chelston in Ireland, ridden to victory by Ryan Moore. You see the pedigree at the bottom of the page. Now, the pedigree is something that may have gotten glossed over a little bit, but probably shouldn't have. She is by Camelot, who we know what he was capable of on his best day over there, and she is out of a green desert mare named Cherry Hinton. Now, the piece to recognize about Cherry Hinton, a couple of her siblings, are some pretty well-known names over in Europe. See the Stars, Galileo, and over here, domestically, My Typhoon, who went on and did many a good thing, a couple of grade 1s and grade 2 victories over here in the States. So this filly is bred top and bottom to be an absolutely exceptional talent. The problem is, and somebody had made a comment to me on Twitter when I put out my value line for this race, and I had her at 32-1. And for a number of reasons, because her recent form was just not good, and I understand the folks that have come back and said O'Brien with a target, this was the goal all along, and you even heard the connections afterwards say this is really kind of what she wanted, even though she had only run 6 days prior. Donica O'Brien didn't really beat up on her, and we knew that she would really get the firm going that she wanted, 10 furlongs, she might even want more. This is probably what she wanted all along. Well, having said that, and I stand by this, to me, 10-1 was a terrible underlay, because what she had done over there was slim to none. But at the end of the day, it just goes to show you always need to respect the Europeans when they come over here on turf, regardless of the form that they have shown. She earns a 97 Beyer speed figure and a 123 time form US rating. That time form US rating is far and away the best she has ever registered. It's really not even that close. She also did probably get a very good setup in here. The 3/4 and mile splits, according to Timeform US, both color-coded red, meaning they were fast, helping these horses come from off the pace. Athena, I was blown away. I thought it was a really good effort, really strong, and it sounds like they could bring her back to Arlington Park over the summer, and they recognize that they would probably need to face older horses in a race like the Beverly D. They think that could be a possibility. So you may see Athena again in a few weeks in Chicago running against the older girls in the Beverly D. Again, no real knocks about her other than I just thought she was a bad bet at odds of 10-1, but she made me look foolish, like, again, many things on Saturday did. The Way I Am. What I had said earlier, I don't mean that as a knock. It's just one of those instances where she's not exceptionally fast right now. She hasn't improved really either, which is a little bit of a concern if you're looking at it long term. But I think the bigger piece there is, to me, it makes me question at least the rest of the field, because I know what The Way I Am is right now. And I also didn't think that she would really adore 10 furlongs. And the fact that she ran as well as she did, it makes me question, where is everyone else? A horse like Significant Form, who ran fourth, I don't really see a heck of a lot of an excuse. Perhaps she was a little bit too close to the pace that heated up in those middle portions, but she had a pretty good trip, all things considered, and she just didn't really finish all that well. Some of these other horses in here, the California horses, if you want to question the Californians going east, I understand. You know, it's a situation where I took a shot with Fatal Beret. I really like that run 2 starts back, but I put that sort of caveat in there on DRF Live that, look, everybody knows that the West Coast turf horses are generally worse than the East Coast turf horses, and the West Coast dirt horses are generally better than the East Coast dirt horses. I took a shot. I was wrong. But really, everyone else in here, you know, you got to kind of look at it and go, I suppose Toinette and La Signore, they both have a little bit of an excuse because of the hot pace, but they shouldn't have finished last and second to last, I don't think, at odds of 7-2 and 4-1, or 9-2, excuse me. If you had to make an excuse for anyone, maybe Capla Temptress gets a mulligan, because really the rail opened up turning for home. Javier tried to push her through, and before you knew it, The Way I Am was down there in that spot, and Javier had to tap on the brakes. But it's almost a little bit of a concern to me that when he asked her to go, Javier, she just didn't really quicken fast enough to get into that spot and establish it where The Way I Am couldn't come down. So I guess I'm a little bit wishy-washy on this race as a whole. Because, again, we talked about it. Athena, her form prior to this, not all that good. But, again, she's beautifully bred. The Way I Am, really nice horse, really nice filly, but it's not as though she really projects to move forward all that much. Chipolata, she hadn't looked like any great shakes prior to coming over here. And Significant Form, okay, she's Significant Form. She's a nice horse, but again, distance 2 here, I wonder if she's going to be better. 8.5 furlongs in that range, perhaps getting back up to Saratoga will be beneficial. To me, this race as a whole is just one that I'm a little bit unsure how I want to approach it going forward. One thing we do know, Athena is just has the breeding in spades, and she has the great connections of Aidan O'Brien and Ryan Moore on this day, and you know what? I suppose you have to just respect any European that comes over, but particularly from that outfit. Athena gets the job done in this year's Belmont Oaks at odds of 10-1. 97 Beyer, 123 Timeform US rating. Let's move over to the main track now and take a look at some graded stakes action Saturday at Belmont. This is the field of 10 signed on for the Grade 2 Suburban. $700,000 was the purse, and based on the tote, really, it was anybody's race. You had 6 horses between 3-1 and 8-1 in a 10-horse field. Wide open betting board, plenty of value to be had if you believed in certain horses. You had a horse that had been successful at Belmont Park in the past. The biggest victory to date for Diversify was last year in the Jockey Club Gold Cup, a Grade 1 at 10 furlongs. Well, guess what? This race maybe not as prestigious as the Jockey Club Gold Cup, but this was an even better performance than what he delivered last fall at Belmont. Here's the stretch run of this year's Suburban.
Diversify, the one to beat as they turn for home. He's got a 5-length lead here. Diversify coming into the final furlong. He's all by himself with 1/8 of a mile to go. And then it's War Story, Zanotti, the Lieutenant, Discreet Lover, and Taprit on the far outside. But Diversify has absolutely crushed his competition. Diversify in the Suburban. What a performance.
Diversify blows the doors off this field of pretty solid older horses. He wins this year's Suburban, the Grade 2 event. and pays $14. The runner-up, the Lieutenant, at odds of 34 to 1, and the third place finisher, Discreet Lover, at odds of 41 to 1. If you played that trifecta for 50 cents, shade under $1,000. Fourth place finisher was Opportunity, one of the choices in this spot at odds of 3 to 1. Let's take a look a little bit deeper at Diversify, who is now 9 of 14 lifetime, 11 times in the exacta, over $1.3 million in career earnings, owned by Lauren Evans and Ralph M. Evans, trained by Rick Violet, bred by Fred W. Hertrick III and John D. Fielding in New York. Ridden to victory by Irad Ortiz Jr., and you can see the pedigree at the bottom of the horse card. He is by Bellamy Road out of a street crime mare named Rule 1. We get into the nuts and bolts as far as the times and figures are concerned. This was a very, very impressive and authoritative score for Diversify. A 110 Beyer speed figure and a 133 Timeform US rating. Some of you may have seen the 107 reported early on. That number got cranked up to a 110 for his effort on Saturday afternoon. The Lieutenant running second, a 101 Beyer and a 124 Timeform US rating. And the third place finisher, Discreet Lover, a 98 Beyer and a 121 Timeform US rating. Diversify, it's already been clear. Oh, so one other thing to make mention. Half, 3/4, and mile splits according to Timeform US, red color-coded, meaning they were fast fractions, which makes this effort from Diversify that much more impressive, especially when you consider how fast everyone else finished the final quarter mile as opposed to Diversify. You had a horse like Opportunity who came from dead last. He finished in 25:20. You had a horse like Discreet Lover who was coming from the back of the pack. He came home in 26:01. The Lieutenant was mid-pack throughout. Came home in 25:84, and your pace setter, Diversify, he finished in 25:84 as well. So this was just truly top to bottom a smashing effort for this Rick Violet trainee. Now Rick Violet has already made it clear the Whitney probably going to get passed. Going to be focused on the Woodward, run him there, give him plenty of time because this was a big, big effort and it took a lot out of him. Violet said afterward the next morning he was tired and wound up. He laid it all on the line yesterday. This was a major league effort, arguably one of the most impressive performances from an older horse we've seen in 2018, and it's about time. Now, the interesting thing about a horse like Diversify, 10 furlongs, he can get it. I'm still not convinced, and I understand I was just laying out those final quarters, which make this race that much more impressive. But it does lead me to wonder, he has had instances where against good horses, he has done this. He has blown fields away. He's done good things again. In last year's Jockey Club, he beat a horse like Pavel, and he finished ahead of a horse like Keen Ice. But then he's also shown up in spots and kind of bombed against better horses. We saw that at Churchill Downs last fall. So Diversify is going to be one of those talents. The good news for him, and I suppose it just is what it is about Saratoga, the Whitney is the race that all the older horses circle. It's almost like that is the main prize. And then the consolation prize is the Woodward. And again, just unfortunately the way that the calendar fits, the Woodward gets overlooked a little bit. Recent memory anyway, because everyone focuses on the Whitney. You'll get some of the horses that run in the Whitney to come back in the Woodward, and perhaps you get some fresh faces. But if you believe that to be the case, this may be a good thing for Diversify, but I'm not sure it will answer a heck of a lot for me going forward if I'm thinking the first Saturday in November. If he runs in the Breeders' Cup Classic, he's going to have other heat that he's going to have to deal with early on. And you saw him pop back to his left lead there toward the end of the run. Makes me wonder, is he really built for 10 furlongs, or is he going to be much better suited at the 9 furlong distance? I personally think he's better a little bit shorter, and that's after seeing him blow the doors off this field by 6.5 lengths. But I don't need to, beat on this point that when you get to the Breeders' Cup Classic, you're going to have a horse who you may have heard of called Justify, who's probably going to be up there pushing the pace throughout. You probably have a horse like Accelerate, who's going to be forwardly placed throughout. He's going to have to do some other things, but make no mistake about it, this was arguably the most impressive performance we have seen in 2018 from an older horse. And if he can replicate this and continue to do this, yeah, you've got a legitimate threat for all the big races for the older horses. No question about it. It sounds like the Woodward is the next start for Diversify. As far as the Lieutenant is concerned, I don't view him as a top older horse. I know he has won a graded stakes race already, but he just doesn't seem like, to me, a horse that you're really truly looking at as far as a threat for a division like the Classic division, where you get horses in the Breeders' Cup Classic or the Jockey Club or any of those types. It is interesting to see, though, that the Lieutenant, he runs second at 1.25 miles at Belmont Park, earns a 101, and his little brother, all he did just a few weeks ago was win the Triple Crown at a Belmont Park. Obviously talking about Justify and Lieutenant, they are both half-siblings. Discreet Lover, I love him. He outruns his odds from time to time. I don't really think he is a top-level horse, but I'm not going to sit here and knock the connections or say don't go here and there. I will just always harken back to he runs his best when he is reasonably spotted, not thrown to the wolves. If they go to the Whitney, I think that's probably going to be a little bit too tough, but I like him. I've always been a fan of him. I think there was some ability. Opportunity, I don't think he ran poorly, but maybe this is just going to show that there is that now he's at that point in his career where there is a chasm between who he can run with and who he can't run with. And also it helps when he gets a little bit of distance. Maybe now he really is that distance specialist. I would imagine, if everything is good, a race like the Cougar the Second Handicap down at Del Mar at 1.5 miles would probably be more beneficial for a horse like this at this point in his career. Tapwrit, I don't think he ran great. I don't think he ran poorly. I thought it was just an even effort, and I've just come to expect this from Tapwrit. I think he is okay and just okay. Don't think he's truly a threat for any of those big races, but who knows? You got to wait and see what the fields look like when they come together. The last horse I will really talk about, last two horses. War Story, this was a poor effort from him, no question about it. Now, perhaps he was too close and he got cooked by that pace, but I don't think you're supposed to fold and finish last. I've made it clear. War Story is a really neat horse. Probably deserves more credit than he's gotten over the course of the years, but he is not a top-level Grade 1 caliber horse. He is better off when he is reasonably spotted. If you get him in certain instances, I don't know that he's truly a Whitney kind of horse. Maybe he can hit the board. But I think he's better off in some of those more middling races where, you know what, I don't know, I'm just throwing races out there. The Monmouth Cup, if they haven't already run that, the 2-turn race on dirt at Monmouth Park. I think that's a good race for a horse like War Story. I think some of those, you can find your spots with a horse like War Story. It reminds me a lot of Discreet Lover. You can pick your spots, but when they get thrown into the deep end, they're just not quite of that level. The real disappointment, and he was just terrible, and you have to hope that nothing's wrong with him, was Dr. Dorr. Now, Dr. Dorr was scheduled, or he was cross-entered in a race at Prairie Meadows over the weekend, and they chose to go to this spot. I thought that was going to be a positive move. He never looked comfortable at any point. It looked like he was in a decent spot sitting 3 or 4 lengths off of it, but when the real running started, Joe Talamo was asking him, and there was no response whatsoever. This was a terrible effort for a horse that had done some decent things in Southern California. To me, it's back to the drawing board. He either needs some time off, or I don't know what else, because he was just really poor in this spot. Never threatened whatsoever. Terrible effort from Dr. Dorr. I think Baffert's got to go back to the drawing board with this horse. But the main event and the main focus, I should say, was Diversify. He went out there and showed that on his best day, he can put up performances that are every bit as good, if not better, than anyone else in the country, male or female. He did so on Saturday afternoon in the Suburban. He gets the job done with a 110 Beyer speed figure and a 133 time form U.S. rating, one of the best performances from an older horse in 2018, and it sounds like we'll see him next in the Woodward at Saratoga. Sprinters on the main track Saturday, race number 7, the Belmont Sprint Championship, only a field of 6. Post-time favorite was Limousine Liberal at odds of 9-5. This is a horse that has nice tactical speed, figured to be in just behind the likely pace setters, but whether it be Shaft of Light or Lewis Field or I Love Lulu, you name it, he figured to be just in behind there. Second choice was Whitmore, who normally does most of his running from the back of the pack. He really would appreciate some hot pace to run at, come with that one run. Hopefully it's good enough, gets an extra half furlong to work with coming out of the True North that was run on Belmont Stakes weekend. Well, instead, we basically had those two. They threw it down. It was a great stretch run, but they had basically the opposite running styles of one another. They flip-flopped. Either way, Limousine Liberal ended up getting the job done. Here's the stretch run of the Belmont Sprint Championship.
Turning for home together, I Love Lulu, Shaft of Light, Whitmore squeezing through at the fence. Oh, he really got bottled out there and bumped with Shaft of Light. In the meanwhile, I Love Lulu's in front. Whitmore's trying to come on with Limousine Liberal, and favorable outcome on the far outside. Lewis Field's in it too late. Final 16th here. Whitmore to the front. Limousine Liberal runs at him. It's down to these two. It's going to be Limousine Liberal.
Limousine Liberal gets the job done by a neck over Whitmore. Whitmore as the top two choices. One of them 9-5, the other one 2-1. Third place finisher I Love Lulu was a forwardly placed horse at odds of 10-1. And unfortunately, you had a couple of horses that were a little bit disappointing in here. Shaft of Light looked like he was a little bit overmatched, and he was actually the pace setter. He ended up finishing 6th at odds of 9-2. And then Chad Brown's entrant, Favorable Outcome, ends up running a disappointing 5th, basically trailed the field throughout at odds of 7-2. Let's talk about the winner a little bit more. Limousine Liberal. He's 9 of 23 lifetime. You see 19 times in the money from 23 lifetime starts, over $1.6 million. Owned by Catherine G. Ball, trained by Ben Colebrook, bred by Mike Ball and Catherine Ball in Kentucky, ridden to victory by Jose Ortiz. You can see the pedigree at the bottom of the horse card by successful appeal out of an in excess merit named Gift of Gab. 99 Beyer speed figure, 125 time form U.S. rating for Limousine Liberal, winning the Belmont Sprint. Whitmore, 98 Beyer, 126 time form U.S. rating. The other interesting thing is, and again, for those of you that are unfamiliar with time form U.S., pace is factored in to the final overall rating. So you can have the normal raw figure based on just final time, but then you also can factor in the pace situation with the final rating, and that's ultimately what Timeform US does, and why I think it's a very valuable tool, using it to compare and contrast as opposed to other figures. So Whitmore earns a Beyer speed figure 1 point less than Limousine Liberal because he finishes second, but he actually earns a Timeform US rating 1 point higher than Limousine Liberal because he was closer to the pace than Limousine Liberal was. I Love Lulu, also co-highest as far as Timeform US ratings are concerned, with the 126, he earned a 95 Beyer speed figure. As far as the race itself was concerned, early on I thought it was a little bit peculiar that Limousine Liberal was as far back as he was, but when you see Timeform US had the quarter and the half, both color-coded red, meaning the pace was very, very fast, Jose Ortiz clearly made the correct call. Also found it a little bit peculiar that Whitmore was as close to that fast pace as he was because he's the kind of horse that appreciates coming from off of it with a fast pace to run at. Instead, he is in there third, just about a length and a half off of it. And, okay, you want to talk about the differences in two trips. Limousine Liberal eventually gets out there, goes on with a nice little bit of a run, but he ends up getting in tight after there's some bumping and banging down to the inside, which we'll touch on momentarily. Luckily for him, it seemed like it was minor enough where he was able to sort of right the ship and get back into the clear and go on with it. As far as Whitmore was concerned, Ricardo Santana, I don't want to sit here and bash the ride because I don't know that it was as egregious as a lot of people are making it out to be. I think it was just an instance where Whitmore was down there, the rail opened up, Shaft of Light floated out, and you had about a path. And when Ricardo tried to go through there, unfortunately, Shaft of Light drifted back down on the inside. They bounce off of each other like bumper cars. And then Whitmore eventually is able to angle out into the clear and come with his run. He goes back to his left lead toward the end of the race and just loses. Some people were making it out like it was a horrific ride from Santana. I don't think it was a terrible ride. I also don't think it was a great ride. I think it just is what it is. That hole was there. You always got to be a little bit leery about those horses drifting back in, especially a tired pace setter. And unfortunately, that's kind of what happened. Now, did it cost him the victory? Personally, I don't think so. But, it's one of those things. He also kind of caused the bumping and banging from the outside that unfortunately Limousine Liberal had to go through. So it is what it is. You had it's racing. Things happen. Horses bounce off of each other. I think the better horse won this day. I think Limousine Liberal, try saying that 5 times fast, was better than Whitmore. I am sure some people will look at it and say that's silly because Whitmore was closer to the fast pace. He had that issue down on the inside, X, Y, and Z. I look at it and say both horses had every opportunity to ultimately get the job done, and one did and one didn't. And it's also worth noting, Whitmore kind of had a little bit of a jump when it's all said and done. He was ahead of Limousine Liberal for a moment, and Limousine Liberal went and ran him down. To me, I don't want to take anything away from either one of them. I think they both ran great races. I think a lot of this had to do with this field and why they were able to overcome all that sort of stuff and still run 1-2. Can you do that against better horses? Can you get bounced around down on the inside and still be able to come with a run up at Saratoga against better horses? Unlikely. Can you take a horse all the way back that has a little bit of tactical speed and still, just because you think you're better than everyone else and then this day you prove to be better, can you take him back and try to make that run and still be able to do that against better horses? I'm not convinced of that. I think these two horses are two of the better sprinters that we have, but I don't think they're absolutely bulletproof like some people have made them out to be. Limousine Liberal, it sounds like, point toward the forego, 7/8 of a mile. No reason not to. He's proven that distance works for him very, very well. Interesting thing from Ben Colebrook, they've discussed the idea that perhaps long-term, they consider the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile as opposed to the Breeders' Cup Sprint. And he said a lot of that will have to do with how that sprint division shapes up going forward. I personally don't love that idea because I don't think 8 furlongs is what he wants. We saw in that Met Mile most recently, prior to start to this, that, okay, the top 2, I'm not holding it against him that he finished 3rd in there, but at the end of that race, he was getting short. I think 7/8, unfortunately for them, that's really kind of an uncommon situation where, as far as Breeders' Cup time, you don't have a 7/8 mile race. I would run him at the 6 furlong distance and just hope that maybe you got a crazy pace, you can come with it or stay close enough to it. As far as Whitmore is concerned, they have an eye on the Forgo, but there's a scenario where they run him in the Vanderbilt. Now, the only concern there becomes you'd be wheeling him back in 3 weeks. Dave Grenning has all this reporting over on DRF.com. I think the 6 furlongs for Whitmore is better than the 7 furlongs. 7 is not impossible for him, but I think 6 is better. Very similarly what I was just saying with Limousine Liberal. I think 7 furlongs is best for him. 6 is not impossible, but I think 7 is ideal. Luckily, you're going to get that Forgo. And again, if you think that this horse Whitmore is okay to wheel back in 3 weeks, Ron Marquette has said how highly he thinks of the Vanderbilt, and that would be a dream of his. I think they should run him back if he's in good order. As far as the rest of the field is concerned, I don't really have much to say about I Love Lulu, Lewis Field, or Shaft of Light. I do have one thing to say about Favorable Outcome. I mentioned it when we talked about this race last week on the preview edition. Favorable Outcome, I think, is just one of those horses that against inferior company is made to look like a superstar. And then when the waters get deep, he can't swim. He had a beautiful setup in here from a pace standpoint, and perhaps there's something I'm unaware of as far as a physical issue, but I think he looks like that kind of horse right now that against middling sort of company, he can look like an absolute all-star. And then when he gets against really solid company, he doesn't cut the mustard. It's a little bit of a tough go of it. So Favorable Outcome to me, he's more of a high allowance sort of level horse as opposed to a true graded stakes caliber runner. But you know what, one thing is for certain. The top 2 runners, they're both very, very talented. Limousine Liberal and Whitmore. They both threw it down. They both had a little bit of adversity to overcome. They both ran very good races in the Belmont Sprint Championship, and it sounds like they could square off in the Forgo, or one could go in the Vanderbilt and the other could go in the Forgo. Limousine Liberal, 99 buyer, 125 time form U.S. rating. Whitmore, 98 buyer, 126 time form U.S. rating in this year's Belmont Sprint. Last graded stakes race from Belmont on Saturday that we'll go over. It was 3-year-olds going a mile on the main track. This was the field for the Dwyer. There was a big name in here coming back after a disaster in Kentucky the first Saturday in May. One of the more fancied choices, Mendelssohn, was coming back, trying dirt again for Aidan O'Brien. He was bet down to 7-5. He was the favorite at post time, but there was another odds drop that caught some people's attention. We'll dive into that here momentarily, and it was a performance that caught many people's attention, one way or the other. Here's the stretch run of this year's Dwyer.
From Firenze Fire, as Rugbyman has given way and 7 Trumpets takes third, 3/4 109.82, and Firenze Fire has run right by Mendelssohn. Firenze Fire has taken the lead, and he's taking off here. He's opened up 5. 7 Trumpets and Mendelssohn battling for second. Rugbyman is 4th behind Firenze Fire, and he's just rolling home.
Firenze Fire with an authoritative victory, winning by 9 lengths in this year's Dwyer over 7 Trumpets, who went off at odds of 10-1, and third is your beaten favorite at odds of 7-5. That is Mendelssohn for Aidan O'Brien. Let's take a look a little bit deeper at your winner, Firenze Fire. He's 5 of 11 lifetime, 6 times in the exacta, over $834,000 in career earnings, owned by Mr. Amore Stables, trained by Jason Service, bred by Mr. Amore Stables in the state of Florida. Ridden to victory by Arad Ortiz Jr., and you can see the pedigree at the bottom of the horse card. He's by Poseidon's Warrior, out of a Langfure mare named My Every Wish. From a numbers standpoint, this race was smashing. 107 buyer speed figure earned in this spot for Firenze Fire. This was a giant improvement over what we had seen recently, and a 126 time form U.S. rating. So these are 2 of the faster figures that you're going to see for a 3-year-old even this time of season. For what it's worth, the quarter-mile split was color-coded blue, meaning it was slow, which makes the effort that much more impressive from Firenze Fire. Now, first things first, let's address the odds situation. Many people were fascinated by the late odds drop at the last second, going from odds of 5-1 down to 5-2. The only thing I can say there is, it is what it is. I've sat there and complained about it in the past as well. I don't think it's a good look. It's hard for me to sit there and tell someone, a fan, not even a new fan, a fan that's been in the game for quite some time, and say, you think you're going to end up getting $12, but instead you're actually going to end up getting $7 and change, $7.50. I mean, that's not an easy pill to swallow. So, and in a game where you can only do so much, if you sit there and you truly go about it and you're looking for value and you're looking for overlays, and if you really like Firenze Fire, it's difficult to say, I want to play him at 4-1. And when they're loading into the gate, he is 5-1. He is playable. And when the gates spring, he is half of that. He's 2.5 to 1. It's very difficult for that to be viewed as acceptable. But at the end of the day, and I'm not going to try to sit here and explain the reasonings, because I don't know all the reason behind the late money influx. I know a lot of it has to do with computers and things of that nature. But it's a problem that I don't know that there is a solution to right now. Maybe in time, as maybe the tote system gets more sophisticated or whatever else it may be, but I'm not going to sit here and try to say that I know a reason or a way to fix this. I don't. Closing the betting earlier will not change that, because you will get that crazy last jump of money no matter what. It's going to happen. It's a tough pill to swallow. You expect it more at smaller tracks where the pools are smaller. It's difficult on a giant day and a giant stage like this. This was the first race of a nationally televised broadcast. It's a hard pill to swallow. Let's talk about the horse, Firenze Fire, and so let's just call it the social media chatter regarding Jason Service. It would be irresponsible for me to sit here and accuse someone of anything. I'm not going to do that. But I've also read comments from Jason Service saying that he's pissed that people are talking about it. The only thing I would say there is you need to be understanding of people being skeptical, where a horse like Firenze Fire, this was his 11th lifetime start, and prior to this race, his career best buyer was a 90, and all of a sudden he earned a 107 in start number 11. Okay, that alone looks a little bit kind of odd. You can look at that with side eye, like, oh, wow, different. But in fairness, and this is what he's wanted, one turn, and his two best races to date have come at Belmont Park. The other piece, though, comes into the numbers and the win percentages. Over the past 5 years, Jason Service has been about a 25% win strike. And you know what? Those are numbers that are going to work, and they're totally feasible. Over the past 30 days, he's 27 for 55. That's a 49% win rate. That's nationally. That's not at Belmont Park. 39 times in the money with an ROI of 302. It's like any other sport or any other instance. When things are so far out of the norm, people question them. And people should question them. That does not mean that I necessarily think there's something nefarious going on. But I think the folks that are being questioned on social media, Jason Service, you have to at least understand where people are coming from. Again, not accusing, not pointing the finger saying you're doing this or you're not doing this. But you at least have to understand why people are asking these sorts of questions. Is it entirely possible that this is just an unbelievable hot streak? Yeah, it's possible. Usually, though, hot streaks last for a week. You look at it in baseball. If a hitter goes 10 for his next 14, usually things start to settle down. This is the duration of the Belmont Park meeting. And there are other big names running that their strike rate is not even half of this. So, again, it needed to be addressed here. I wasn't going to just totally gloss over this. I think it's a little bit irresponsible to just sit there and accuse people of things. But I also think the people that are on the defensive, Jason Service in this instance, you at least have to understand why people are coming forward and saying something doesn't look right here, just because of the overall body of work, and with a horse like this that all of a sudden he jumps up the way that he did. We'll leave it at that. As far as this horse is concerned going forward, 107 buyer, and it sounds like and Service said this, we did the Derby thing. It was fun. Now that we're all over that, we're going to run the horse where we think he's at his best, which would be one turn and these shorter races. It sounds like the Alan Jerkins up at Saratoga is the next planned goal. I think that fits very, very well. This is a horse that he does his best coming from slightly off the pace, but he's shown the versatility and the ability to get into the run a little bit earlier. He's never run this well. This was a smashing effort. I mean, he stopped the clock in 33-3 for a mile. We're talking about big league stuff for older horses. Forget about 3-year-olds. But this is the kind of thing that, you know what, anyone going into that Alan Jerkins up at Saratoga, if you approach a horse like Firenze Fire with caution, I would not fault you whatsoever. And if you approach a horse like Firenze Fire, and let's just say, hypothetically, the next highest buyer in the field is a 99, and if you approached this horse and said, he's just faster, he's just better than these horses, I wouldn't argue with that either. This is going to be a fascinating sort of horse to see what people make of him going forward in bigger races and better races and against better company than he faces. The last piece that we'll touch on with this race, and no disrespect to any of the other runners, but we have to acknowledge Mendelssohn. There have been a number of people on Twitter that have pointed out to me. There have been a number of people on the video player here on YouTube underneath saying he was never any good, Mendelssohn can't run, X, Y, and Z. And I had said last week that if he lost this race, I would sit here and admit and say that he's not as good as I thought he was. And I can sit here and say that he is not nearly as good as I thought he was. I thought he was truly a top-level, top-quality talent. I still think he has talent. I don't think he is what I thought he was. I thought he was a horse that could run in a race like the Breeders' Cup Classic and be a threat. Now, perhaps in time, that could still be a possibility, but I've lost a tremendous amount of hope and faith in that. There have been other people that have tried to make a good situation out of this race and say, well, if O'Brien and company seem content with this is nothing more than a means to an end. Some people have even brought it up and saying it was a prep race. Well, it's difficult for me to sit here and say a prep race for a race in November happened in July. This isn't really a prep to me. The folks that he wasn't cranked up and ready to go. I don't believe that either. He wasn't supposed to run again until September over here. And you even heard the assistant to Aidan O'Brien say, well, we have some mile races on turf over there that could be options. Regardless of where you stand on Mendelssohn today, and I am saying, sitting here, he's not nearly as good as I thought he was. You can't look at this race and say that this was a positive race. I thought he was going to win this race for fun. Not only did he not win, he ran third, and a well-beaten third. Now, his absolute best race probably doesn't beat Firenze Fire on Saturday. Justify's absolute best race probably doesn't beat Firenze Fire, if we're being totally honest. This is far and away the fastest 3-year-old race we've seen so far. But it goes, it's worth repeating. I vastly overrated Mendelssohn. Perhaps I'm getting off a little bit too soon, but this was a really, really poor performance. And I understand you can say this was his first real race because you don't want to include the Kentucky Derby. His first real race since the UAE Derby, which was at the end of March. Still supposed to do better. Still supposed to beat 7 Trumpets. If nothing else, finish second. Don't finish third the way that you did. So I'll admit it. I was wrong about Mendelssohn. And maybe I'll change my tune going forward and I'll try to give him another chance. But on the heels of this effort, this is clearly not a horse of the same caliber that I thought he was. But one thing is for certain about this year's Dwyer. You had an epic performance from Firenze Fire. Wherever you fall on him and everything that has gone on around him, that is your prerogative, your call. But you can't argue with this. This was a major league effort from Firenze Fire on Saturday, and he'll probably be a major player in any one-turn race he shows up in next. Sounds like the Alan Jerkins at Saratoga. A 107 Beyer speed figure and a very, very lofty and gaudy 126 Timeform US rating for Firenze Fire winning this year's Dwyer. From one blowout victory to another, let's go down to Delaware Park Saturday. This was the field for the Grade 3 Delaware Oaks. You had a field of 8 signed on. And, okay, with a couple of scratches in here, you took out one of Pletcher's entrants, Cascanueces. You just take out Geo Game. It kind of left Red Ruby where if she could transfer and translate that unbelievable performance over a sloppy sealed racing surface down at Pimlico over to a fast main track, then she was simply better than the rest of these horses. I don't think anyone could have anticipated her being this much better than these horses. Here's the stretch run of this year's Delaware Oaks.
He's playing the outside track today, and Red Ruby on the far outside will have to be beat. Coach Rocks toward the inside racing second, but Red Ruby's on the perfect spot on the track, and she's drawing away. Red Ruby's going to be an impressive winner of this one, it appears. Red Ruby by 5, by 6. Coach Rocks is second best. Red Ruby! Back-to-back impressive scores. She'll win in the center of the track, and she'll win it by 8 or 9 lengths. Coach Rocks getting second, going to be tight for third.
Red Ruby absolutely destroys the field. Wins by 13 lengths. over Coach Rocks, who was your second choice at odds of 2-1, who was 8 lengths clear then of Mo Shopping, who ran third in here at odds of 15-1. If you played that trifecta for 50 cents, it comes back $6.50. Let's take a look at your winner, Red Ruby. She's really done little wrong in her career. She's 4 of 6 lifetime, 5 times in the exacta, $438,000 in career earnings, owned by Sandra Sexton and Brandy Nicholson, trained by Kellen Gorder, bred by Hargis Sexton, Sandra Sexton, and Silver Fern Farm LLC in Kentucky, ridden to victory by Paco Lopez, and you can see the pedigree at the bottom of the horse card. She is by Tisnow out of a Rubiano mare named Caroni. Here we go, giant figure. 104 Beyer speed figure for Red Ruby in her 13-length smash in this race, the Delaware Oaks. She finished in 31:39. The only real knock I have about this performance was she was a little bit late to change leads, but otherwise she decimated this field. She was wide throughout. Paco Lopez rode her with the utmost confidence, and the way that she just drew away from this field. Now, she didn't beat a heck of a lot, but it at least gives me reason to believe that from a speed figure standpoint, she's right there with the big girls. She's faster than the Wonder Godots of the world. She's faster than the Monomoy girls. She's faster than the Midnight Bisous. And it sounds like the plan, according to Kellen Gorder, if you believe his quote was, the Alabama has been our target, and the farther she goes, the better. So she's going up to Saratoga. And you break all these fractions down incrementally like you can in Formulator, 23.95, 23.48, 23.59, and 31.39. This was really, really impressive. I don't love that she was getting out a little bit down the lane, just kind of, but I wonder if that was a part of the situation where being so far off the rail throughout, perhaps she got a little bit bored out there. Who can blame her? She never had to pick her feet up, but she ran. This was a really, really strong effort. I say she never had to pick her feet up. She never had to fight for anything. 104 Beyer, if you look at her, she's so lightly raced. If you think that additional distance is going to be her friend, Red Ruby's interesting. Red Ruby, this is a very impressive performance. She needed to prove to me as a handicapper, and I don't know about anyone else the way that they looked at it, but she needed to prove to me that she could replicate those big wet track efforts on a fast main track. And she did just that on Saturday afternoon. Now, I'm not suggesting she's going to move forward to a 110, but if you think that she can earn a triple digit going 1.25 miles, she's got a big, big chance in a race like that, and she may actually offer a little bit of value depending on who shows up in that race. So, smashing effort. I thought this was a really good performance from Red Ruby. Good ride from Paco. If you think you're on the best, keep him in the clear. Don't let anything happen. And a good training job from Kellen Gorder. This is a horse that she's had some little hiccups throughout her early 3-year-old campaign, and it seems like she's flourishing right now. This is a big league effort, and I expect more big things from her over the summer. Red Ruby, a smashing winner of this year's Delaware Oaks, a Grade 3 race, 1 mile and 16th on the main track. She earns a 104 Beyer, and it sounds like the next start's going to be at 1.25 miles up at Saratoga in the Alabama. Last race we'll dive into here on the recap edition is the Victory Ride from Belmont on Sunday afternoon. At this point, the days are all just blending together. Sunday afternoon, here was the field of 8 3-year-old fillies going 6.5 furlongs. It was an interesting race. Your favorite was Mia Mischief, who she made a lot of sense in here. She was very sharp, coming in on the heels of a score in the 8 Bells on Derby weekend, but you had other alternatives. You had Spectator making her first start in New York. We hadn't seen her since early April. That was out at Santa Anita. Then you also had the return of Separation of Powers, horse who we had not seen for Chad Brown since the Breeders' Cup Juvenile fillies out at Del Mar in November. You had some horses taking class hikes. You had horses coming in from out of town. You could have gone a few different ways in here. Ultimately, there was a bit of a barbecue up on the front end and helped set up for a horse coming from dead last, the second longest shot on the board. Here's the stretch run of this year's Victory Ride.
0.63 the half, and Sower is coming up on the outside of them now, and they're into the stretch, and here comes Sower to the outside of Classy Act. Mia Mischief put to pressure on the inside. 3 lengths back to Take Charge Paula. Separation of Powers is starting to run on 2, and then comes Dixie Serenade. They're coming to the final 16th. It is Sower on the outside of Classy Act. These 2 late bids. Dixie Serenade up the inside. I think she got there.
Dixie Serenade gets it done at odds of 47-1 and pays $97.50 on top. She runs first over Classy Act, who ran too well to lose, running second at odds of 8-1, and your third place finisher was Sower for Linda Rice at odds of 6-1. If you happen to play the trifecta for 50 cents, that came back $1,134. And if you include Separation of Powers for Chad for 10 cents, the superfecta came back $13.72 with some change. Let's talk about the winner, Dixie Serenade. She is 4 of 11 lifetime, 9 times in the money from 11 lifetime starts, $266,750 in career earnings, owned by Uptown Charlie Brown Stud, LLC, trained by Ed Coletti Jr., bred by Fantasy Lane Stable in Pennsylvania. The jockey Michael Sanchez. And you can see the pedigree at the bottom of the horse card. Uptown Charlie Brown, out of a Malibu Moon mare named Moonlight Serenade. 86 Beyer speed figure for Classy Act, who was the runner-up. 86 Beyer for the winner, Dixie Serenade. 85 Beyer for Sower, the third-place finisher. And then the next 4 fillies, they all registered 82 Beyers. The big piece about this race, Dixie Serenade had everything go her way. A horse like Classy Act had everything go against her, where she was battling on the front end. She put away the 7-5 favorite, Mia Mischief. She put away a bid from Sower, who was one of the shorter prices in the field. And then, unfortunately, just from a heady ride from Sanchez, Dixie Serenade was able to shoot up the inside and get the job done. I'm not saying this was not a well-earned victory for Dixie Serenade, but she had a lot of things go her way, and conversely, Classy Act had a lot of things go against her. I think Classy Act is one of the horses that you want to take out of a race like this. I thought Sower ran fine, but I'm having a difficult time deciding if I think that she just got repelled by a horse like Classy Act, or if she hung. Now keep in mind, her only victories prior to this had been basically in gate-to-wire fashion, so she needs to prove a little bit more that she can handle sitting off and coming with a bit of a bid, but it was at least a positive enough effort considering she's so lightly raced. I think this was a very good effort from Separation of Powers, considering we hadn't seen her since November. She stumbled terribly coming out of the gate. She put in a long, sustained bid. At the top of the lane, she got in a little bit tight, had to check really quickly. Jose then got her back into the clear, and she finished with some interest. To me, this is going to be an effort that she can certainly move forward from. I would imagine if you go up to Saratoga for a race like the Test, this would hit her right between the eyes. I think this is a big effort and a race that you can certainly build upon if you're a fan of Separation of Powers. Disappointing effort from Mia Mischief, but at the same time, it's a tough thing. I can say it was what made the race so good for Classy Act and give the excuse for Mia Mischief, because that pace was very, very hot early on and contested 22-1, 44-3. So Mia Mischief, it's disappointing she faded as badly as she did, but at least you got the built-in excuse that she just got cooked in a duel. A disappointing effort from Spectator. Spectator really never showed any sort of interest in a race like this, and you just hope that she needed one off of the bench because you expected a little bit more than this. She ultimately was the second choice in this race at odds of 7-2. Disappointing New York debut for her. But look, credit where credit's due. This is a big effort for Coletti Jr., the trainer, and the rider Sanchez. Dixie Serenade, she wins a graded stakes race with an 86 Beyer. Classy Act, probably one that you're going to want to put in your DRF horse watch. I'm still interested in Sower, and I'm also very interested in Separation of Powers wherever she should show up next. This was an important race and an interesting race going forward. We'll see what these 3-year-old girls do over the summer, exiting the victory ride. We're going to dive into this week's stakes montage. You got some graded stakes in there, including the Great Lady M from Los Alamitos, and you've got some other nice stakes racing from all over the place. Delaware Park, Parks, Belmont, Woodbine, you name it, you've got it. Here it is, this week's stakes montage.
And she swings into action about 7 wide into the stretch, but look at that run. Marley's Freedom in a blink of an eye have to challenge the lead. Marley's Freedom, Sky Diamond steps on the gas and tries to stick with her, and these two class mares now come to duel it out, but Marley's Freedom got the jump on Sky Diamonds, and she's pouring it on as they come inside the final furlong. Marley's Freedom getting away from Sky Diamonds, and on her way, Marley's Freedom to win the Great Lady M, and she did it by 2.
Scenario for her, but Broken Brattle once again regains a half-length margin. Esquisse is there, Palinodi looking to kick it in. Toward the inside, Tricky Escape looking for a way through. On the far outside, Creative Thinking. Tricky Escape is bidden for the big upset. She's got the lead with a 16th to go and begins to draw away. It's going to be Tricky Escape. Late run, Giovanni Blues up for second. Palinodi got third, Photo for fourth.
Moves up as they straighten away. Pure Sensational under a Ryan third. They're on the straight. Inside, Pool Winner has the lead. On the outside, Vision Perfect moves up the challenge. Link back, Pure Sensation trying to kick in now. Out by Bold Thunder. Inside the 8th pole. Outside, Vision Perfect now takes the lead. Inside, Pool Winner battles back down to the finish. It's Vision Perfect.
Across the track, Sav stifling, and on the outside entirely they go on, stifling in the center, on the outside entirely, then came Miguel Betty, 'tis breathtaking and question of the day, stifling on the inside, finding entirely on the outer, here's Miguel Betty out the clouds, and stifling Miguel Betty, and down the outside is 'tis breathtaking, Miguel Betty. In a photo, Stifling or Tis Breathtaking for second and third, and then
Inside run is Somersault as they come toward the top of the stretch, and further out it's Violet Blue. It is Savannah Bell, joined on the outside by Homeland Security. These two with Somersault behind them and Violet Blue to their outside. Homeland Security grabs the lead with a 16th to go. Savannah Bell, Somersault is third. Homeland Security has won the River Memories over Savannah Bell.
Pink Lloyd niggled at here. Boreal Spirit the outside. Jack's Escarpment a danger. And Jack's Escarpment coming. Oh, Pink Lloyd's in trouble a little bit here. Pink Lloyd by a length. Jack's Escarpment. King Sport flying home. King Sport right through in the center. There's an upset in the brewing and King Sport's done it. King Sport by a length and a half. Jack's Escarpment and Pink Lloyd.
There you have it. This week's stakes montage wrapped up with the stunning defeat. Pink Lloyd goes down in the Shepperton Stakes. Ron Gierkink reported on Monday morning. You can find it over on DRF.com. All is well with Pink Lloyd. His trainer, Robert Tiller, said he jogged sound this morning. He's good to go. Haven't quite picked out which race he'll show up in next, but that's racing. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Pink Lloyd's win streak is snapped at 11 consecutive in the Shepperton on Sunday afternoon. Let's dive into the weekend's best performances from a Beyer speed figure standpoint. Let's dive right into it. The 3-year-old males on dirt. No surprise. Firenze Fire gets it done with a 107 Beyer speed figure in the Dwyer Stakes. 3-year-old fillies. We saw Red Ruby with a 104 winning the Delaware Oaks at Delaware Park. 3-year-old males on turf. You've got Catholic Boy and Analyze It. Their rivalry continues. 99 Beyers running first and second in this year's Belmont Derby. 3-year-old fillies on turf. Athena. She earns a 97 when she wins the Belmont Oaks for Aidan O'Brien and Ryan Moore. Older males on dirt. Diversify. 110 Beyer winning the Suburban at Belmont Park. Older fillies. Marley's Freedom. You just saw her win the Great Lady M in the stakes montage with a 91 Beyer. Older male on turf. You want to talk about a crowded group right here. Cacho Ndie, Divisadero, Caniçar, and Solio. All 100 Beyers. 3 of them earned in the Stars and Stripes at Arlington Park. 1 of them in the Arlington Handicap. Also something that needs to be addressed. We will, when it comes recap time for Arlington Million Day, we will go over those races, but because we don't get video footage and all that, it just kind of bogs everything down. So that's why we didn't dive into any of those races from Arlington for this weekend. But Arlington Million weekend, we will dive into all of those. An older female on turf, Smiling Causeway, a 101 Beyer in a stakes race at Parks. There they are, the weekend's best Beyer speed figure performances on the recap edition of the Matt Bernier Show. If you have been listening live on Tuesday, thank you for doing so. Live.drf.com, livestream.com, Daily Racing Form's Twitter handle at DRF Inside Post, as well as the Daily Racing Form's Facebook page. If you have been listening podcasts like most of you do, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com, and Spotify. If you listen on any of those, particularly on YouTube, you're going to be curious to see what's on deck for this week here on DRF TV. Plenty of great action. Illman is off this week, so you get a heaping helping of myself and Mike Beer. We'll be going through and headlining and co-hosting this entire thing, going through the latest edition of Out of the Gate and all sorts of other programming. We've got DRF Bets Races of the Day. The Weekend Warrior is off, so I will be writing that column as well. That'll be up on drf.com midweek. And we will also have all sorts of other good things in there. But most importantly, Out of the Gate on Thursday, the latest edition will be uploaded and it will be streamed live following the preview edition of the Matt Bernier Show coming up on Friday. Again, those are all your podcast forms. If you listen on YouTube, click that subscribe button. You'll get all the latest stuff from DRF TV. Give us a thumbs up. And also over on iTunes, write us a little bit of a review. Give us a positive rating. Would be greatly, greatly appreciated. Until we talk again for the preview edition of the Matt Bernier Show, taking a look at racing from next weekend. Best of luck, however you're playing, whatever you're playing, wherever you're playing. You can follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. Questions, comments, concerns, you got it. Fire away. Have fun the rest of the week. This has been the Matt Bernier Show.